faster you get your green card, the more secured your estate purchase is, right? Like think about like what is happening right now with the layoffs and stuff. I mean, you don't want the H-1B sword always hanging on your head for 20, 30 years or maybe 90, I don't know. How does that EB-2-3 line move? So that to me is the biggest connection. That fast track it, and then maybe Nagaraj would not agree here, but maybe divert the funds first towards the green card and then towards the house. Anyways, I mean, and even if you have a property, you can actually leverage it to fast track your green card. So it's a both way, it's a two-way connection. We have the EB-1A, we have the national interest waiver, and we have the EB-5. These are the three topics that I'm going to touch on, and with specific reference to the EB-5, because it's honestly a highly underrated option to get your green card, and there have been some major legislative changes in the EB-5 program that happened in May 2022, which means this year. And they've been the biggest congressional improvements in immigration law in over a decade, okay? So when I say congressional, I mean the actual legislation, which is different from just these half-assed attempts to sort of solve the immigration problem. Okay, can we go to the next slide? This pretty much summarizes the sad, pathetic situation that we have for the EB-2 and the EB-3 green cards, right? You have priority dates, you have the upgrades, the downgrades, the EB-2 fast, EB-3 faster, EB-2 faster. Should I move from EB-2 to 3? Now get back to EB-2. Now which queue do I do? So this is sort of the whole chaos that we are hoping to see if we can break through from this mess that we have. Note here, EB-1 is current, and EB-5, which is not, I should have put a slide there, but EB-5, which is another, the next option that I'm going to talk about, is also current, okay? Next slide, please. Now, the EB-1A. I guess many of you familiar with the EB-1A. It is what we call the Extraordinary Ability Green Card. And most people have the question for me is, isn't EB-1A only for PhDs? I'm not a PhD holder. Like, how can I get the EB-1A? It's actually not true. EB-1A is not only for PhDs. EB-1A can be used by anybody who is able to show a demonstrated record of excellence in their field, in whatever they do. That field could be arts, sciences, business, education, sports. Obviously, here in the Valley, yes, it's pretty common to do business and sciences and tech, but you know, people are, nowadays you have, thankfully, like there are so many people who are exploring options beyond just the tech, and I've consulted with clients who may have like a record of success in arts in back home. They may even be athletes. They may kind of be exploring newer trajectories, and it's a great way to see if one of your partners, in case you're married, like you can see if you can leverage that towards the green card. Now, I won't go so much into what the legislative criterion is. It's kind of listed on the site. You know, you have to show, how do you show a demonstrated record of achievement? How do you show excellence? Now, the regulations list 10 criterion, and you need to show that you meet at least 3 out of the possible 10. Assuming that you don't have a PhD or you don't have publications and you don't have, you don't have a research-based background, basically. This is how I say that you can meet the EB-1A criterion. Many people here, you have been working in engineering backgrounds for 10, 15 years, right? You may even have some patents, scientific contributions that you've made. You may have led major engineering projects and initiatives. You may have been responsible for some big product launches in companies. All those can help you achieve the criterion of original scientific and business contributions. So if you're a techie in the Valley, you've been working at good companies, at good positions for 10, 15 years, that's sort of a pretty, that would be the meatiest part of your application. What's the that you've performed over these last 10 years that can showcase you are amongst the best of the best at what you do? Right. Second would be a high salary. I mean, which means looking at stock options, Facebook, Google, Amazon, people who are working at these, it's really not hard to see W2s of 250K, 300, half a million, right? That easily goes on to achieve one of the criterion for the EB1A. Third could be being employed in a critical capacity. You may have led major engineering initiatives in the company. And when you say critical capacity, basically the idea is to show immigration how the work that you did was critical to the company. Now, to give you an example, it's hard to show, I mean, think of a company like Facebook or, any of the bigger ones. How do you show that your work was critical to Facebook? Like the work of an individual contributor, right? I'll give you an example. I worked with clients who were responsible for sort of, the engineering issues around protecting child abuse online. Now, that's a major legislative reason for which Facebook had to make massive amount of investment towards this. Now, this is critical capacity. You may not necessarily be an engineering director, or you may not necessarily be sort of a CEO or a C-level executive, but the work that you are doing is important enough for the company to be qualified as critical capacity. So now, right here, you meet 3 out of 10 criteria. Now, then there are ways to improve your profile. And those are things that we recommend. How about you judge hackathons? How about you kind of get yourself invited to speak at some prestigious events? How about you participate and win hackathons? That to achieve the criteria for prizes or awards. Now, right there you have about 4 criteria. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it is not easy. Simply meeting 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 does not automatically qualify you for an EB1A. Even after that, there is something called the final merits determination, in which we have to elevate your profile to that of which is strong enough to be considered. But at least it's a great place to start to explore, and there is absolutely no downside to it. It doesn't jeopardize your current EB2. It doesn't blacklist you. It doesn't do anything else. You may lose a little money, but honestly, in the big scheme of things, you are gaining far more than what you're sort of losing. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. The national interest waiver. The national interest waiver is an EB2 criterion. So you may ask, well, how does it help me? It doesn't help you jump ahead of the queue, but what it does do is it keeps you away from the dependencies of the employer. So at least if you have your own NIW, it's not that every time you're switching a job, your employer has to start the perm process and the I-140 process all again. And I don't know how many of you guys are facing it. I mean, some people are nodding, so I guess they understand that. But right now, the perm process is messed up. It's taking 11 months to get a prevailing wage determination, okay? So if you don't have that much time on your H1, you don't have the luxury of going through a perm process and then the company getting, like Facebook had a massive issue with perms, even though they were doing all the compliance, right? They had to go through, you can't lay off and do a perm at the same time. So think about all the problems that your perms are going to get through if during a recessionary sort of phase. So having your own I-140 kind of at least protects you from that. Now the next slide is the EB5, which is what I would really, really love to talk about. And this is honestly the fastest way for an Indian born to get a green card. Period. That's it. Okay? Unless you're single and you choose to marry a US citizen for love. That's sort of the only option that you have. And EB5 is an investment-based green card. What it does is the investment amount, depending on the area you make an investment, it's 800,000 or 1,050,000, in return for which you and your family get a green card, okay? A great option if your kids are not born in the US. Because if your kids are also waiting in line, you will most likely never get them. They might not see the EB2, EB3 queues move forward. Now, the reason I'm particularly drumming on the EB5 and what is the legislative changes that came. Now, EB5, the processing times are long, priority dates are current. So you're not waiting in line like the EB2, EB3. What happened in May 22 is Now with the change in EB5 law, you can file an adjustment of status along with your investor visa petition. So like think of it as investor is the I-526, which is like akin to the I-140, the immigrant petition. Along with your investor petition, you can file an adjustment. What it means is, as soon as you file your EB5, you will get a work permit, you will get a travel document, you'll basically have everything that it takes but the actual green card. This change was not there earlier. So earlier, people who filed an EB5 had to wait 3 or 4 or 6 years, maybe, or depending on how long it took for the I-526 to be approved before they even got an EAD. So people were like, well, I'm making all this investment and I'm still waiting 4 or 5 years. Like, does it make sense, right? Now, you can make that investment and you have everything but the green card. You have the work permit, you have the travel document, and this is really huge. I mean, this will free you from the H-1B queue. No more waiting in line for getting appointments at the consulate. Like what? It's about a year now to get an H-1B visa stamping interview at one of the consulates.